The forceful removals was allocated Indians in Lenasia and Coloureds in El Dorado Park and so forth. But our story was like we should have been moved by the time Sophiatown was moved. Nevertheless, we are bona fides there, we're born in the area, but nothing was considered for us.
The African inhabitants of Fietas never really owned property, so they were always backyarders and tenants. And the irony now is that they have no claim and no stake to Fietas, yet still kind of live there, and that memory lives on in them.
Pageview will never be the same again. Yesterday, Pageview was dead. 14th Street and Pageview were a part of Johannesburg. It was a tourist attraction. It had glamour. It had an atmosphere of its own. It can never be matched. It can never be replaced.
Torsten.
Hi,
How are you?
Salma. I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Nice to see you.
Yes, you too.
Welcome to the Fietas Museum. Come on.
Thank you.
Welcome to Fietas Museum. Now, I'm going to tell you some very, very interesting stories about Fietas. Now, I went to girls' school, okay? And in those 4 classes there, that was, we called it the annex. So when you were standard 4, what year were you born in, Tate?
63.
63?
Yeah, 63.
Okay, okay.
20th August.
20th of August, 63. So were you born in Fietas?
My name is Ntate Ibrahim Modimukwane. I live on the corner of Krause and 10th Street, number 2, Pesco House. It's a shelter. What do I do presently? I'm a security guard. I work on the corner of Wimbledon and Barnes Street in Brixton.
My name is Torsten Dekler. I'm an architect. My practice is called 2610 South Architects, and I work in it with my wife, Anna Graupner. Ntate is a friend and an employee of ours. He's our security guard at our new office in Brixton. But we met Ntate really as a storyteller, somebody who regaled us with tales of his childhood and his life in Fietas. He's still living in Fietas, albeit in a temporary shelter, and now that's been for close to a decade. And Ntate's story really highlights the kind of plight of the African backyard dwellers in Fietas, because they were never really legitimate landowners, so they have no claim of title to the land claims. So we started our practice in Fietas for several reasons. One was that it's very centrally located. It was also cheap, and it had a very interesting history for us. It was quite a sad history, but something we really felt like we didn't know about. We were based on 14th Street at number 25A. In one of the remaining shops, there were only 2 remaining after the forced removals, and our building was beautifully renovated by Salma Patel, our landlady, and with the help of Nuera Wolf Architects.
I met Thorsten through 4 of the other guys that have been doing work, bona fides of the area in Fietas. We call ourselves the Fietas Festival. And these are just guys that came to me at the shelter and say they needed interested people who know about Fietas. By luck, I was also born in Fietas and I became part of them.
One of the main people that spoke about Fietas in a very evocative way was Manfred Hermer, who published a book of his drawings of Pageview, Vredendorp, which Fietas was the name for it. And it was interesting for us that he was one of the architects working on Ponte Tower, which is a modernist icon and symbol, but that he had the sense of appreciating what 14th Street and Fietas represented as a vibrant urbanity. The architectural relevance of Fietas for me is really tremendous. It's on one level a very personal experience that I was fortunate to have. I grew up in a kind of privileged bubble in a suburb, and it was a way for me as an architect to connect better with kind of the city that I'm in Johannesburg. I wasn't interested in living and working in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg. Okay, Ntate, we're going to help me draw your house. But I'm going to start with Krauser Street. That's Krauser. And the school was here. I'm going to draw a book.
I was born at the premises of number 4, 22nd Street, Vredendorp. My parents rented 2 places, which the other one was on Delray, between 23rd and 24th Street in Vredendorp, known to us as Fietas.
The forced removals and the architecture is really interesting that the apartheid government felt it necessary to actually destroy properties down to the ground. And that for them was a way to kind of eradicate the area. It was done under the rubric and the kind of language of Slum Clearance Act. And I think that's even today in contemporary South Africa a way to move people off valuable land and settle them onto outsides of the outskirts of the city.
At one stage, coming back from school, that is where we saw bulldozers. We saw demolishing of some of the properties. We saw trucks that were organized by the city of Joburg taking people per race, per color.
All the empty plots you still see in Fietas is land that has never been rebuilt, and they evidence the forced removals. The reason they might have not been rebuilt yet is because there's a series of land claims that are underway.
The forceful removals happened in phases, meaning we had to live as vagabonds at that stage, because if you have about 13, 14 parallel streets with houses, as people moved out in phases, the houses that were half demolished or so, we had to go and take our stuff and snatch for the night and so forth. Yeah.
Despite Fietas having been, mostly destroyed and people moved out, there is still something that is unique to this area, and that probably has something to do with the original soul of the place. And the things that I noticed, because I only ever know it in its current state, is the proximity to the street of buildings. So people have to get to know each other. They invariably get to know each other.
So a building was found for us here. It was revamped. It has 2 floors, 50 rooms. So we went in the 22nd of March, 1997, initially. To date, we are about running for 20 years now. It is more called a transitional house, initially. It was to become one of 8 pilot projects identified by the city.
With Brixton and Fietas being on the brink of urban redevelopment as part of the Corridors of Freedom strategy, I think it's really important to consider what kind of city we want to create. And 14th Street tells us something. It tells us a story about a tolerant community, a vibrant community. If you look at it more closely, the city functions weren't all separated into this is where retail is, and this is where living is, and this is where the cinema is, but it was all kind of embedded into the residential fabric. So for me, the biggest lesson in that, and that I would take into kind of a future vision for these areas, is that that can happen again.
In terms of renovations, and so that building has never been renovated for the last 17 years. So our fate lies on the agreement between Lennon and the city of Joburg, which ends in 2020, December 2020. After that, we are not sure what's going to happen.